In this video, New York style pizza in a conventional home oven. And New York style actually stems from Neapolitan style in the sense that it is a thinner crust pizza, and it was one of the first styles of pizza to appear in the United States and is based a lot on the Neapolitan versions. Now, it's normally cooked in a much hotter oven than you have in your home, so we're going to add a couple of extra steps and tricks here to try and get that crust the right color and texture. So here I have bread flour that I'm mixing with my water. This is just our standard autolyse step, which allows the gluten in the flour to fully hydrate. So we're just going to mix together just enough to where the flour is no longer dry, and then cover and let this rest for about 30 minutes. Now, in this series of videos, I was not adding the yeast to the autolyse step, which is pretty traditional. Normally, you don't add the yeast in the autolyse step. However, I have found through further testing that it doesn't really make a difference in the gluten formation. So it's easier to incorporate the yeast at this stage where you just add it to the water, dissolve it in the water, then you add your flour, mix it together until the flour is no longer dry, then cover with plastic wrap and autolyse for 30 minutes. Now, after the 30-minute autolyse process, I'm going to add in my olive oil. And the olive oil is going to do a couple of things. Number one, it's going to make the dough more extensible, meaning easier to stretch. But also the fat is a good conductor of heat. So it's going to allow the dough to brown more rapidly, which is important when you're working with home ovens, right? So a normal traditional pizza oven, they start at around 650 degrees Fahrenheit, but they can go as high as 1,000 degrees. Some of the coal-fired ovens in New York can get extremely hot. So after I incorporate in the oil, I'm adding in sugar, and sugar again is going to help the dough brown because sugar will help conduct the heat, and sugar browns easily. And then some salt, and the salt, of course, is just for seasoning. And then we will also stir in our yeast at this point. And because we're using instant dry yeast, you can actually sprinkle it right in. Again, it's best practice, in my opinion, to dissolve it in the water before the autolyse. Some people at this point will stir in some water to allow it to dissolve. But if you just mix it in a little bit at a time, because it is instant dry yeast, it rehydrates relatively easily. And you're going to see this dough is going to rise no problem later on. So we'll go ahead and mix in the yeast, which is the last of our ingredients. And now we're going to knead this in our KitchenAid attachment for about 8 minutes total. So 4 minutes on number 2, then turn it off, let the dough rest for a second, let the KitchenAid rest for a second. Then you give it another 4 minutes for about a total of 8 minutes. And what you're looking for is gluten development. You want the dough to be able to pass the window pane test. So if you were to pull off a little piece of dough and stretch it, you should be able to stretch a thin membrane. And you can see this dough is fairly elastic and responsive. So at this point, I'm just going to take it and form it into a ball. And I'm tucking the pieces of dough in underneath itself. So I'm forming a skin on the top. And that's just going to give it some resistance. And then I'm going to finish by rounding. And the rounding process is I'm just going to roll the dough around while I'm pressing it through the board, or pretending like I'm pressing it through the board, and then do a couple of quick tension pulls just like that. And you can see I have a nice round piece of dough now. And again, that rounding process, that tension on the top of the dough, is just going to allow the dough to bulk ferment more evenly and expand more evenly. Now I'm going to place some plastic wrap over the top and proof at room temperature for 2 hours or until it's doubled in size. You can also, at this point, during the bulk fermentation process, retard in your refrigerator overnight. Now, after the bulk fermentation, you're going to split into 2 pieces, and you're looking for about 310 grams a piece for the New York style dough. And then once you have them portioned appropriately, you're going to just tuck in the edges, so you flatten it into a disc. And this is pretty standard if you've gone through any of my other bread baking videos. You're going to flatten into a disc, and you see how I'm just kind of pulling the edges into the center. Again, I'm creating that tension on the top by rounding the dough, and then we're going to place onto the sheet tray that I lined with some parchment paper and spray with a little bit of nonstick spray and allow it to proof. And for the proofing, again, you have an opportunity here to delay the fermentation for more flavor by placing in the fridge up to 12 to 24 hours, or if you want to bake them in the next hour or so, you can just proof at room temperature for about an hour to an hour and a half or until they double in size. Now I'm going to spray the top of the dough with just a little bit of nonstick spray, because if that plastic wrap sticks, once these double in size, then it will collapse the dough and make it harder to work with. So now I'm going to sprinkle a wooden pizza peel liberally with some cornmeal. It's going to help me offload the dough later, but also too, I like the flavor and the texture that the cornmeal offers this style of pizza crust. So I'm going to dust my work surface with a good amount of bread flour and pull off one of the pieces of dough and stretch it. Now, when forming your dough, you never want to roll it out. You always want to stretch it. Now, you can see here it's sticking a little bit to that parchment paper, even though we sprayed it with nonstick spray. All right, so that's why you always want to be vigilant about using nonstick spray, because it did collapse the dough a little bit. But it doesn't matter, because we're still going to be able to stretch these guys out pretty nicely. So here I have the round disc, and I'm going to flour both sides. And I'm going to use the pads of my fingers to press the air in the center of the dough out into the exterior of the crust. And that's going to give our crust a little bit of a poof. Now, a New York style dough is a little bit flatter than other styles of pizza dough, and it doesn't usually have a big, thick crust at the end. Now, if you like a thick crust, you can underproof your dough just a little bit, because this dough right here is slightly overproofed, which is going to give us a thinner crust, which is what we're looking for. But you can underproof your dough or just proof your dough regularly, and then you'll have more gas to work with. Now I'm going to do the stretch out, just like the Neapolitan dough, where I stretch it out to 9 o'clock and then flip it down to 6 o'clock. And this is going to allow the dough to open up naturally. And we have another video on actually stretching dough by hand that you can refer to for more details. So this is going to allow the dough to stretch and open up naturally, versus a rolling pin, which would give us a more condensed texture, which is not what we want. You can also hang the dough on your knuckles and let the gravity do a little bit of work. And what you're looking for here is about a 12 to 13 inch disc. And obviously in New York, the pizzas are a lot bigger. I mean, they're known for those big floppy slices, but you know, good luck getting a pizza that size in one of your home ovens. So here we have just our simple raw San Marzano tomato sauce. You can use any sort of red sauce that you like. For both my Neapolitan pizzas and my New York style pizzas, I like a really simple raw red sauce. Now for my toppings, I'm going to go nice and simple. Some sliced mushrooms, some chopped Kalamata olives, and some thinly sliced white onion. I'm going to lay that down before I place the cheese on top. And for the cheese, I'm just going to use a generous helping of some low moisture, low fat mozzarella, and that tends to melt a little bit better. Now you want to give the pizza a little shuka right here, right, to make sure that it's sliding easily about the peel, because right now isn't the time to realize that, oh no, my pizza is sticking to the peel. So I'm sliding this onto a stone that has been preheated to 550 degrees. This is the highest my oven will go. So 550 degrees on a pizza stone. And this is going to take me about 8 to 10 minutes, depending upon the kind of mood my oven is in. So you will get different mileage with different ovens, but about 8 to, I think it's taken as long as 12 minutes before. But just check your pizza at around 6 minutes and use your best judgment. But when it looks like this, when the cheese is bubbly and slightly brown and the crust is nice and poofy, your pizza's done. So congratulations. And look at how tasty that looks. I like to cut into 8 pieces, and I like to use a large chef's knife. I've never been a big fan of those roll cutter thingies, but just use whatever you want. Give the bottom a check. You see how pretty that bottom is? Oh, so gorgeous. And that cornmeal kind of baked right into the bottom of that crust, which is going to give us a really nice texture. Now, of course, you have to do a pepperoni pizza when making a New York style, because you have to. I think it's like there's a law or something. And you need to do lots and lots of pepperoni, and then make sure that pepperoni is on top of your cheese. That way the pepperoni gets brown and crisp around the edges, and you can see how the pepperoni has rendered and become greasy. Now you have a greasy, soppy, messy pepperoni pizza. I mean, to me, that is one of the more tasty and delicious pizzas on this beautiful earth in which we live, right? So New York style pizza. For more information, check out our episode show notes and all of our resources found at stellaculinary.com/pizza.